Right now, somewhere in your house, there's a stack of stuff you tell yourself you'll do when it rains. A book, a show, a drawer you keep meaning to clean out. You've got a whole mental backup plan for bad weather, and you probably don't even realize you built it. That backup plan is older than you think. It's older than writing, older than farming, older than cities, older than the wheel. Every single human society, in every climate, on every continent, has had to answer the exact same brutal question. What do you do when the sky just won't stop? Because here's the thing nobody tells you about prehistory. It wasn't all mammoth hunts and cave paintings. A huge chunk of ancient life was just waiting. Waiting out storms, waiting out floods, waiting out weeks where you physically could not go outside and survive. So what did they actually do in there? Let's go back to the start. And weirdly, the start isn't even human. Long before Homo sapiens existed, our ancestors were already ducking for cover. Around 2 million years ago, early hominins in East Africa were using natural rock shelters, basically big stone overhangs, to escape the rain during seasonal downpours. Researchers studying sites like those in the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania have found tool scatters clustered tightly under these overhangs, not spread out across the open landscape. That clustering matters. It means something simple but huge. They weren't just eating there, they were staying there, waiting. That's a rain shelter, 2 million years before agriculture. Now fast forward, way forward, to around 100,000 years ago, and a cave on the coast of South Africa called Blombos Cave. Archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood excavated this site and found something strange for a cave that floods with rain runoff for weeks at a time during the wet season. Engraved ochre, pieces of red pigment stone deliberately scratched with geometric patterns. Crosshatches, lines. Nothing practical about them. Nobody scratches abstract patterns into rock because they're hungry. They do it because they're bored. Henshelwood's team argued these engravings represent some of the earliest known symbolic behavior in humans, and the location is the giveaway. Blombo sits in a region with a rainy season that can trap people inside for stretches at a time. You weren't hunting in that. You weren't fishing in that. You were sitting in a dim cave, rain hammering outside, with a rock and a sharp stone, and you made something. That's art, possibly invented out of sheer weather-related boredom. Here's what makes this so important. We tend to think of human culture, art, storytelling, ritual as something that happened during the good times. Around campfires, after a big hunt, when everyone was fed and relaxed. But the evidence keeps pointing somewhere else. It keeps pointing to the bad days, the trapped days. The days when the world outside was unlivable and the only thing left to do was turn inward. Bad weather might be one of the most underrated inventors in human history. Let's keep moving. Around 44,000 years ago, in Sulawesi, Indonesia, a tropical island absolutely drenched by monsoon seasons, you get some of the oldest known figurative cave art on Earth. Archaeologist Maxime Aubert used uranium series dating on the calcite crust covering the paintings to get that number, and the images themselves show therianthropes, half-human, half-animal figures, painted deep inside limestone caves. Sulawesi's wet season isn't a light drizzle. It's weeks of near-constant rain, and the caves these paintings are in, dry, sheltered, and completely useless for anything except sitting still. So, picture it. Outside, nonstop rain, flooded rivers, unworkable ground. Inside, torchlight, wet stone walls, and someone deciding to paint a man with a buffalo head onto the rock. That's not decoration. That's storytelling, born out of forced downtime. And once you notice the pattern, you can't unsee it. Let's jump to around 13,000 years ago, to Rakafet Cave in modern-day Israel, where a Natufian community left behind stone mortars used for something unexpected, brewing beer. Researchers led by Li Lu found residue consistent with fermented wheat and barley, way earlier than anyone expected alcohol production to exist. The Natufians weren't full-time farmers yet. They were semi-settled hunter-gatherers, tied to caves and rock shelters, dealing with the Levant's unpredictable rainy seasons. And brewing takes time. It takes waiting. You don't brew beer when you're sprinting after gazelles. You brew it when you're stuck. That's beer, invented in a cave, possibly out of pure cabin fever. Quick pause, because I know what you're thinking. Our ancestors dealt with existential rain boredom by getting drunk and painting on walls. And honestly, relatable. But the pattern gets bigger from here, because once humans start actually settling down, building permanent structures instead of just sheltering in caves, bad weather stops being just an annoyance. It becomes an architectural problem. Around 7000 BCE in Çatalhöyük, one of the world's earliest large settlements in modern-day Turkey, archaeologist Ian Hodder's team uncovered something telling. Houses built with almost no ground-level doors. People entered through holes in the roof, using ladders. Historians studying the site point to flooding and mud as one likely driver rain, turning the ground between homes into an unusable swamp for days at a time. So what did people do when the rain hit? They didn't go outside at all. They stayed inside their mud brick homes, packed close together, doing tasks. Archaeologists have found tons of evidence for weaving, grinding grain, painting the interior walls with red ochre murals of hunting scenes and abstract patterns. Entire households, sealed off from the mud outside, spending days making art on their own walls. Think about that. The rain didn't just shelter people, it shaped how their homes were built. Now, let's jump to somewhere the rain isn't occasional, it's the whole ballgame. Around 2500 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization, in what's now Pakistan and northwest India, built cities almost obsessively engineered around monsoon rains. At Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists have documented an extensive covered drainage system running beneath the streets, connected to individual homes. This wasn't decoration. This was infrastructure built by people who knew because they'd lived it, generation after generation, that weeks of monsoon rain could either be managed or become a disaster. And what did people do during those long monsoon stretches, once the drains were doing their job and the streets weren't flooding? Trade records and artifacts suggest indoor craft production ramped up hard during the wet season. Bead-making, pottery, weaving, all happening inside homes while the rain did its thing outside. An entire civilization's daily rhythm, built around indoor waiting. Here's the pivot, and it's a big one. We've been treating rainy week boredom like a minor inconvenience in the story of human history. But look at what it's actually done. It pushed early hominins into shelters that became the blueprint for architecture. It gave people forced stillness, and stillness turned into engraving, which turned into art, which turned into symbolic thought, arguably one of the most important developments in the human mind. It gave people the downtime to experiment with fermentation, which gave us alcohol, which shaped economies and rituals for thousands of years afterward. And it forced entire cities to engineer themselves around water, which gave us some of the earliest urban planning on Earth. Rain didn't just interrupt human history. It might have written some of it. Let's bring this all the way forward. In medieval Europe, monasteries dealt with brutal, weeks-long rain seasons by keeping monks inside the scriptorium, dedicated rooms for writing and copying manuscripts. Historians studying monastic schedules, like the Rule of St. Benedict, note that bad weather often meant longer stretches of indoor labor, copying texts, illuminating manuscripts with elaborate colored borders, brewing. Yes, again, monastery beer that monasteries became famous for. Some of the most beautiful illuminated manuscripts in human history, gold leaf, intricate detail, insane patience, were partly the product of monks who, quite simply, couldn't go outside. Even later, in 19th century England, during an unusually cold, wet, stormy summer in 1816, caused by a volcanic eruption on the other side of the world, a group of writers found themselves trapped indoors at a villa near Lake Geneva. Bored out of their minds by nonstop rain, they challenged each other to write ghost stories. One of them was 18-year-old Mary Shelley. She wrote Frankenstein, one of the most influential novels in the history of science fiction, born directly out of a group of people stuck inside because it would not stop raining. So here's the full picture. 2 million years ago, our ancestors huddled under rock overhangs, waiting. 100,000 years ago, someone scratched patterns into ochre out of pure boredom, and symbolic thought was born. 44,000 years ago, trapped by monsoon rains, someone painted a man with a buffalo's head onto a cave wall. 13,000 years ago, people stuck in a cave invented beer. Entire cities rearranged their architecture, their drainage, their daily rhythms, around the reality that sometimes the sky just doesn't stop. And centuries later, a bored teenager on a rainy summer wrote one of the most iconic stories ever told. Every time humans got trapped by the weather, something got made. So next time, it's raining outside and you're scrolling through your phone, half bored, half comfortable, thinking about that book or that show or that project you keep meaning to start, you're not procrastinating. You're doing the single oldest thing humans do when the world outside gets unlivable. You're turning inward, because you have to. And something about being forced to stop moving seems to be exactly when humans start creating. Maybe that's the real story here. Civilization didn't just get built during the good weather. A surprising amount of it got built while everyone was stuck inside, waiting for the rain to stop, and doing something about the boredom instead. If you liked digging into the weird, overlooked corners of human history like this one, there's more of it waiting for you here. No pressure, just stick around if you're curious.